Hi, I'm Beverly, and this is Paint and Simple Makes. I'm glad you're here with me today. So in the last tutorial, I showed you a very simple Christmas card. I love making Christmas cards, and I don't know about you, but I have a lot to make, and sometimes I get bored making the same one over and over again. So today I have another tutorial to show you how to make this card here. And basically, we're just taking a piece of cardstock, and then we're cutting some squares in complementary colors. It's got to be two-sided paper here, and we're using some dimensionals, and we're adding a ribbon. And so it's very simple, and there's some variations that you can make, and I've got some of those here that you can see. This one here is pretty much the same as the one that I just showed you, but I used some natural twine, like jute twine, to make this one. This one here in the center is pretty much identical to the first one that I showed you. I just used a different kind of ribbon, a different color of ribbon. And then this last one here, the ribbon that I used is printed with a holiday sentiment, and it says "Home for the Holidays." But these are all very simple and really don't take that long to put together, which is sometimes important for Christmas crafts. So I hope you stick around, watch the whole tutorial. I'll show you step by step how to make these cards. And please share if you make one. I'd love to see it. Share it on my Facebook page, share it on my blog. And if you like this video, click like, click subscribe, and share it. Thank you so much. The first thing that we have to do is to cut all of our squares for the Christmas tree card. For the design that I've chosen here, we're going to need 4 tiers. And so each tier is a different size square. So the smallest squares are going to be 1 1/4 inches. The next size will be 1 3/4 inches, and then 2 1/4 inch, and then the biggest square will be 2 3/4 inch. And I use my Cricut Maker. I just designed these squares and use my Cricut Maker to cut them out. I know I can get a precise square, so I use my Cricut Maker, but you don't have to have a Cricut Maker. You can just cut these out by hand. And I will have a pattern or SVG or PNG for the squares so that you can have an exact square to start with as well. Notice that the paper that I'm choosing is printed. There's a pattern basically on both sides. So one side is more green. It's almost solid, but there is some light design there. And then the other side, there is printed with a design that has some silvery elements to it. These are not traditional Christmas colors, but they're similar, and actually they have a more vintage feel to them, probably than the traditional Christmas colors. But you can choose whatever you have. This just happened to be some paper, some cardstock that I had, so that's what I chose. I think this is about 60-pound cardstock, and for these Christmas tree tiers, you're going to need about a 65-pound. You don't want to get too thick though. So once you have all your squares cut out, you are going to fold from one corner to the diagonal corner. And once you do that, you're going to take one of those corners and fold back to that long side. And so you need to decide which side of your paper you want to kind of be the accent. And it was obvious with the paper that I chose that I wanted the green to be the green of the tree, really, and then the side that was more heavily printed and had the silver accents on it, I wanted that to be the embellishment. So that's the side that I would fold back to the long side, as you can see here. And I'm just using my bone folder. You can use anything with a really hard side to it. But we're going to do this for each of our squares. And once you get into a rhythm of this, it's really easy to forget which side needs to be out and which side needs to be in. So just be cognizant of that as you are folding. So you can see that I fold that from one corner to the diagonal corner, and then I'm going to take one of those corners and fold back to that long side. And so this one is our second to smallest square, so it'll be our second to smallest tier of our Christmas tree. And then this is our very smallest one. It is the 1 1/4 square, and so it's pretty tiny when you start folding. And you do want to make sure your edges are even and you get a good crisp fold there. That's why the bone folder comes in handy. And it's really tricky sometimes to fold that corner back to your long side. Just holding it down with one finger and then using that bone folder to get that crisp fold. So for our 4-tier Christmas tree, we have our 4 tiers folded now. And so I'm going to use a foam adhesive square. It's a dimensional, to make sure that that little flap stays down on the tree. And so it has adhesive on both sides, so when you take the when you remove it from the paper and then remove the top of it, you can stick it to the cardstock. And you're going to put that under the flap, but also under the first fold as well. So this keeps the tier intact, but it also provides some depth to our card. And you know, we're always trying to add depth or dimension to the cards that we make. And so we do that a lot of times with these foam adhesive dots, or squares in this case. And so each square is going to get 2 foam dots, one under that tiny flap and then one under the first fold. Now on this card, for that very top tier, I did not use foam dots. I just used some double-sided tape. And that looks okay, and it works fine. But you'll notice later on in this video when I'm doing the other cards that I don't do this, and that's because I decided that I liked having all 4 tiers with that same dimension, and so I use those adhesive foam squares even on those the tiny top tier of our tree. You do need double-sided tape to add to each of these tiers now, and we're going to add this just above the fold, and that's so that we can layer the tiers. So I start with the bottom tier and I put some double-sided tape on the top of that right above the fold, and then I press the next size, which would be the 2 1/4 size. I press it right above and then add some double-sided tape to the top. Press the next tier, which is the 1 3/4 size. Make sure that they all get pressed down well. Add another piece of double-sided tape to the top, right above that fold. And of course your pieces of tape will have to get smaller as you get closer to the top because you have less space to work with on your cardstock. And so you'll put that final piece right at the top. So that's the top of your tree. And you can see just from the way I was holding it there that there is some dimension to the tree already. You've got some depth there, except for on that top layer. And as I said, I decided I didn't like that, so later you'll see that I'll add some square dimensions there. You also want to add a star to the top. Now this was a foam adhesive square, glittery, it's not square, a foam adhesive glittery star gold star that I already had. You may have something similar that you can use, or of course you can purchase something similar. Or you could just cut a star out of some glitter cardstock. So for this card, I'm going to layer it. So I cut a piece of white cardstock that's just a little bit smaller than my base. It's going to be about 1/4 of an inch smaller than my base all the way around. And my base is to the right of the screen there. It's the muted red and green stripes. And so my white cardstock is going to be just a bit smaller than that. And then I had some Christmas scrapbooking paper that I cut a small rectangle and mounted it onto that white layer. And now I'm taking some jute twine and I'm just wrapping it around that cardstock. I think I wrapped it 3 times, and we're just going to create a little bow over on the corner. And I apologize for my hands being out of range of the camera there. I forget sometimes as I'm crafting to keep in front of the camera. And I could have cut all this out, and you're going to see that I don't like the way the bows are working, and so I undo this and try again a couple of times here. And I could have cut all this out and you wouldn't have to watch it, but I also just promised you that I would show you, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And sometimes crafting gets messy and things don't work the first time. And they certainly don't work the first time for me, so I wanted to show you that. So I'm kind of leaving this in just so you can see that this is how I really do it, and this is how it works out sometimes. Alright, once I have that bow the way I like it, I just trim the ends a little bit. One of those ends was a little bit long. If you wanted to add a little bit of hot glue here, you can, but it's really not necessary. That jute twine is going to stay on there. So now I just sort of eyeball how I want to place the tree on that white cardstock layer. And I have cut a little tree trunk out of some brown cardstock, and it's very textured, and I don't know if you can really see that in the video here, but it's textured, so I really could use either side of it, but I really like this cardstock for these tree trunks because it actually looks kind of like bark, so I thought it was really appropriate for a Christmas tree. So we are going to add double-sided tape to the back of that tree so that we can mount it on the white cardstock. And I'm not thrifty with the double-sided tape because I want to make sure that that tree stays on that piece of cardstock. So once you have it positioned, you want to press it, make sure that it's sticking really well. And then we need to mount that whole layer, that white cardstock layer, onto our card base. So again, I'm going to add double-sided tape to each of the sides here. We want to make sure that that layer stays on the card base. So my card base, I cut a rectangle that is basically 8.5 by 5.5, and then I fold it in half lengthwise. So my card, my finished card is going to be like 4.25 by 5.5 because I used 8.5 by 11 size paper, and I can get 2 cards out of that. And so this is the first card, or the first variation of this card. So let's look at some other ways you can do this. So you're going to do the squares the same way as we did previously, but we're going to skip having that white cardstock layer. We're going to skip that entirely, and you'll see why in just a minute. So I'm going to add the tree trunk I'm going to add the tree trunk to this tree. Note also that I reversed the paper here. So now that green is actually my accent piece, and the printed side is more of the tree. So it gives it a different look entirely. And again, you want to make sure you get enough double-sided tape on there to hold that tree on the card. Also notice, you can see here on that top layer, that tiny layer, I did use the foam square adhesives instead of the double-sided tape. I just like that look better. I'm going to add the star. Now these stars are very common and you can purchase them anywhere, but I suggest looking to see what you've got in your supplies. It's always better to shop your supplies. And this is what I did here for this ribbon, and this is also why we are not really mounting it on white cardstock. This was an embellishment that I had in my supplies. It's a green ribbon. It's been cut so that there's a design on the edges, and 2 crystals embellish it on the ends. And so I just added it straight to the base underneath that tree. Did not need to have that white cardstock layer. So I'm showing you one more here. Again, we fold and layer the squares the same way we did with the very first one. That doesn't change no matter which variety you decide or variation you decide to use. That doesn't change. The only thing really that changes is what type of twine or ribbon you want to use. If you want, and how you want to design it. If you want to wrap it, then you're going to need to use that white cardstock layer like I did in the first example. If you are just going to mount one strip of ribbon, then you don't need that white cardstock layer. So I'm adding another very similar ribbon here. This one is actually a burgundy with buttons. And so it's similar to the second one, but it has buttons. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please like and share.